Everyone, and welcome once again to Housing Needs Show and Tell. This will be our last show and tell for the year, so thank you for joining us. We're going to kind of go through some of the work that we've been doing over the last month or so. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, you are very welcome. My name is Yeti. I am the delivery manager for the team. Miranda, who's not with us today, is a content designer, and then Katrina is a content consultant from Libertat, who is working alongside the team. And then Rob and Sarah. Rob is our user researcher, service designer, and Sarah, project manager, who've been covering ESONs and the rough sleeper pathway. So just an overview of the team if it's your first time and what we'll be going through. And I think at this point, I will hand over to Katrina, who's going to give you an overview of what we've been doing on the web content side. Over to you, Katrina.
Hello. Yes. So hi, everyone. We've been working on basically a content plan for housing needs content. So that's got two sides to it. There is a side that's more based on the existing content that's on the website. So Miranda's been working really hard on that and doing some great work. So we have two new pages around homelessness and rough sleepers that were completed and published and went live. We've also completed first drafts of revised housing register content. And basically, this has been done in line with content design best practice. So this is a discipline that came from gov.uk and allows people to be able to better find, use and interact and engage with content, basing it on user needs and evidence, and structuring it in such a way that it's much more easily digestible. And that's really important, obviously, in this context, when we know that people in this situation can frequently be quite stressed and overwhelmed. So it's really important that that content's easy to use, and it's been overdue for updating. So as a result, the revised content is being split into 4 to 5 pages. So this means there's a smaller amount of content on each page. This is reflecting the way that users interact with information online. In fact, the way that we all interact with information online. We don't necessarily expect to have to go through long form content to find what we need, and similarly it makes it much easier for those pieces of content to surface in Google search results. So it's also a complex subject, so it makes it much more easy to digest when it's broken down into smaller task-based chunks. Check if you can do this, register for this, find out who else you can register. There are further pieces that are about checking to see if you're eligible and applying to the housing register that have been 2i'd and sent to the relevant subject matter experts for fact checking. So those pieces, once they've been through that fact check, we would be able to publish them. And we've also completed first drafts of request a review and how priority is decided on the register. So that's these are all around basically that key stage of people wanting to get social housing or council housing, and really being able to highlight for them how key it is being able to check whether this is something you want to go into, what the actual context is, whether you're eligible, how actually decisions are made, and hopefully that will also filter out some people who maybe might want to take a different track or could take a different track, for instance looking at finding private rented accommodation. So next slide, thank you. So the other side of the content work that's going on is new content, and that's the temporary accommodation content. So this is 5 or 6 pieces of content, maybe more just now. Again, those are using content that is not on, we don't have it on the Redbridge website, so we've been using basically content that is on other councils who are using user experience design best practice and who have temporary accommodation. And the idea of that is to be able to produce some first drafts that we can then pair right with subject matter experts, and be able to get to stage quite quickly where we have a whole raft of content. So I've completed first drafts of the initial pieces of that. We are seeing this as fairly seamless user journey for someone who is going into temporary accommodation, who's had that first point of contact, for instance. And so there would be key pieces about understanding what temporary accommodation is, when it happens, who it's for, what happens next, and being able to prepare for moving into temporary accommodation, but which is both about understanding the rules and your responsibilities and your rights, as well as other key things that could help people that we know that would be useful to them, understanding what things you might need to change or do around, your children, your dentist, your doctor, your pets, any belongings you might need to put into storage. So those have been drafted and gone through 2i and gone through a content crit. And as a result of that, they're going to be broken down into maybe 4 or 5 pieces that would be shorter and just kind of chunk it up more so it's easier to read. So those are now ready for 2i. And once those have gone through 2i, which is a fairly rapid process, they'll be ready for fact check as well. And the next stage will be, completing the rest of that temporary accommodation content in terms of completing drafts before Christmas. Also, the other thing that's been happening in the past month is a second iteration of the content strategy. So this is an asset for internal use and to hopefully drive conversations and ideas and actions around how to both create content and manage content, as well as how to install or update governance structures, including workflow and roles and responsibilities, and really ideally to head towards a joined up content strategy across all channels, and picking up on that again, so that can move things forwards and really help people not only outside the council but within the council. And that's been presented back to internal stakeholders. And this is just a reminder, I presented this before, but it was a month ago. So this is content plan as it was standing. This is going to be updated to reflect the way that the content is evolving as we're building it. But this is generally where we're looking to head to, which is a whole areas of content that address key user journeys that are much more findable and usable, and that also surface key themes where the council can help. For instance, in the valuable support that the council offers and the valuable advice, including for distinct user groups such as refugees, asylum seekers, gypsies and travellers, and older people and vulnerable people. So I just thought I'd remind that. Next slide. And on the next sprint, which is a shorter sprint because obviously we're coming up to Christmas, we will be continuing with both revising the content for the content plan, working with subject matter experts to get content fact checked, especially where processes are complex and information is layered. That's obviously really important that we make sure we're providing important information, particularly things like the housing register. We want to make sure that's accurate. So that's really key, and that's obviously reliant on we know resources internally and people being very having a lot of work on their plate. We'll also be continuing to build up new temporary accommodation content. And by that, I mean, I'll basically be completing the drafts for that whole new area of content before Christmas, and that will be 2i'd and ready for fact check. And that will be then iterated, based on sort of feedback from inside the team and the subject matter expert input in terms of peer writing. I think that completes the web content section.
Thank you, Katrina. At this point, I will hand over to Sarah and Rob, who are going to share the work that's been happening in Rough Sleeper Pathway and eSINs.
Thanks, Yeti. Yeah, if you go on to the next slide, please. So this is just a review again of the slide that we presented at the last show and tell, but like Katrina's just said, that was a month ago. So eSINs is empowering communities with integrated network system. And the purpose of eSINs is to provide rough sleepers and those at risk of rough sleeping with a more joined up, consistent service. But it's also looking at the street community as well. So it will enable access to rough sleeper information, street homeless information, and partners involved with eSINs or involved with the partnership can input and manage information about known rough sleepers. This can then be shared at the task and targeting meetings and community MARAC that we discussed yesterday with the enforcement team. We can share information with enforcement. We've got a single point of reference for all people working with the Rough Sleeper Network and the wider street community network as well. and we can add and maintain operational data on rough sleepers in a single application. So that's just a summary of what eSINs is, and just a real reminder of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Next slide, please, Yeti. So this sprint, we held phase 1 one-to-one discussions. These involved discussions on an individual basis, and in a couple of occasions on a team basis. And these were with SHP, that's the Single Homeless Project, with the Metropolitan Police, that was particularly with the ASB team, with the Welcome Centre, who are, they provide showers, hot drinks, food, and shelter for rough sleepers, and with our own Redbridge team, the rough sleeper team. So that was David Ring and Vicky Sharp. So following on from that, we had following the one-to-ones, we had the workshop as well. And within the workshop, we discussed the data sharing and how eSINs will be used to start with. So this was around, there were a number of issues that came out on the initial discussions and the workshop around consent. I'll talk about that in a moment, but it was just making sure that, because it's not just partners that are sharing information from the voluntary side and from the third sector, we're also sharing information with enforcement, with community safety, with adult social care, and with the police. So there was that extra layer and that extra detail that we needed to consider as well. So we developed a revised consent form for use by the partners, and this has been shared with the partners and approved by the partners as well. So it's not just something that we've done on our own. It's been worked with and developed with the partners, so that they're comfortable working with their clients, to enable sharing with the police, with community safety, and with all those different teams that we can share data with. We've also held phase 2 one-to-one discussions. The eSINs has been broken down, the MVP, the minimum viable product stages, have been broken down into a number of different phases. The first phase was throughout November, with eSINs being used from this week on a live basis, on an active basis. So the partnerships are going to be using eSINs from this week. The second phase is from now until January. So we've started to hold some phase 2 one-to-one discussions. We've held them with the enforcement team and the community safety teams within Redbridge. And we've also held them with partnerships with the Westminster Drug Project, which is WDP, and Project Malachi, which is part of the Salvation Army. The general consensus from everyone that's coming forward is that eSINs seems to be, or appears to be, a very, very positive system to be using, and the fact that people can be communicating and sharing information can only be a good thing. Next slide, please. Thanks, Yeti. So I just wanted to bring this in as the governance. So eSINs has broken down into, we've got the rough sleepers and the street community in the centre, and we've got the enforcement side, which is ASB, which is street cleansing, which is sort of the street enforcement, and we've got community safety, which is around DV and more of the strategic way of the community safety side. And then we've got housing around the rough sleepers. So in the centre, we've got the rough sleepers. We're clear on the enforcement and the community safety as to where we're going, but with I'm sure you're all aware that Dwayne left last week before, so he was our person to go to with this, from the housing side. So we'll be looking to Janet and that side, but we also need some clarity around who we're working with and what we need to be doing from the housing perspective as well. But we'll be working with all the different teams from there. But I just wanted to be really clear as to the governance from here. Next slide, please, Yeti. This is just an example of the consent form that's been agreed with the Single Homeless Project. So we sent a couple of examples and we worked through a couple of examples with them. This one, seem to be the preferred option, and it goes through a series of questions as to what the purpose of the form is, what the information will be used for. So why are you signing that you will approve it, that your data can be shared? Why are you giving consent? What is informed consent, and the categories of data that we're going to hold. So this was deemed to be the most appropriate level of consent and the consent detail that we could share. So this is actually in action now. This is being used by SHP to with their clients within the SHP properties, so Jason Lee House, Well House, Good Maze and Green Lane. So they're starting to use this now. We'll also start to look at it for Rydale as well. Once we've got consent, then we can start to add people as profiles within eSINs. We've already got the addresses in, so they've all been added. The properties, the detail for Jason Lee, detail for all the other SHP properties have been added. So then once we've got the profiles and the people, we can link those to the addresses. So then we can have a clear, we can provide clarity on who's where and then move on and where they're going to and their level of support that they're going to be getting. So it just it makes it a lot clearer. Yeah, thanks, Yeti. That's just the second page. So that gives the additional information about personal information, what it means, and who we're going to share information with. So we're clear there on who we will be sharing information with. eSINs is the type of system that you can go in and search for somebody, but you won't necessarily see any detail about that person. So if you went in and searched for me, you might get my name, surname, date of birth, or age range, and my last known address. You wouldn't necessarily get anything else. So this level of detail and this level of consent makes it a lot clearer for people to add detailed information into eSINs. Next slide, please, Yeti. I just wanted to go back on this because this was the original eSINs implementation timeline, which is slightly changed now. So the November MVP, so the minimum viable product phase 1, included Redbridge Housing Needs, a solution team, which was David and Vicky, so from the rough sleeping side, SHP, which is the Single Homeless Project, the Welcome Centre, and the Metropolitan Police. So as I said earlier on in the discussion, we had one-to-one discussions and one-to-one conversations with those people and representatives from those agencies. And they all attended a workshop, I think it was 2 weeks ago today, down at Linton House, which was really, really informative. We're going to be following that same pattern throughout the whole of the phases. So as you can see here, it was broken down originally into 6 phases. Can you go on to the next slide, please, Yeti? Thank you. So we've revised the implementation timeline now to combine December and January. The reason being that we had a workshop planned for the 13th. We're doing the one-to-one sessions now. We've got a lot of information now, but there's a planned rail strike on the 13th. So it was going to be difficult for people to get in. So we thought we'll put it back until January and we'll merge the people who were going to be included in January into the December/January session, and we're going to have a process workshop on the 10th of January now, with a switch on of the active system for those people in the December/January phase. That's going to be week commencing the 16th of January. In between that, we're also going to be having sessions with people on a Thursday. So it's an open session. As we're starting to use eSINs, there'll be issues and challenges and questions that keep coming back. So we're going to be having this session every Thursday, which is an open session, and will enable people to come in and say if they've got any problems, how things are working, what's good, what's bad. So that's going to be useful. That's starting this week is the first one for that. So in the December to January cohort, we've also added in Ramfell So that's the refugee legal support who helps out with rough sleepers and anyone with no recourse to public funds. So they're also included. And originally in the January plan was adult social care, but we've put those back until February because we want to make sure that we've got quite a lot of information available and time available for them. Next slide, please, Yeti. So the proposed activity for the next sprint, we're continuing ESIN's onboarding for the phase 1 partners. So we're starting as of now. It started yesterday afternoon actually. The onboarding for the active system. So they'll be using the actual system, not the demonstration system. So they can add active information, active clients from now on, as soon as they've got consent. So as I've just spoken about, we've got the weekly review calls to work with partners who are using ESINs to see what's good, what could be better, what's missing, and then we can go back and develop that as we're going along. We've got calls with partners for phase 2, and we've set up teams and individual users on ESINs to enable sharing with consent. So we've got the first lot of users on there. They've started, like I said, yesterday afternoon. There was no fanfare or anything like that, but they're starting to use it now. And then we've got the second workshop planned for the 10th of January. And I think that finishes the update on ESINs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. At this point, I'd like to ask everyone or anyone to put forward any questions or comments you might have on what you've heard and seen so far.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Shahana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, please go for it.
So I've got a few questions. I hope let me just fire away. It's mostly to do with the stuff that Katrina spoke about at the beginning, and it sounds like you guys have done some brilliant work. And what I'm not concerned about, but what I just wanted to know is how will that be communicated to staff on the front line in terms of all this information that's here? And I know a little while ago Janet did a customer journey kind of thing. I say thing in terms of what she presented, and how does it link, and how will staff on the front line know? Because I think information is as good as people who are using it. And my worry is that you guys have done all this brilliant work and it looks fantastic and it'll be really helpful, I think, for residents. But if we don't know that it's there, then we're not directing people to it, and then it doesn't get used as efficiently as it could be.
No, those are brilliant questions. Thank you very much for that. And yes, absolutely. We know that, as you say, you can develop the most beautiful content in the world, but if no one knows it's there, then they're not going to find it or use it. So we would anticipate, I would certainly be recommending that there is a certain comm strategy that goes around this, and that would include basically both staff being briefed, and also how this might be communicated through the various channels. That might include social media, to really kind of highlight, for everyone that it's there and can be used. I think that's something that we'll probably be tackling in the new year as we start to move on with the next stage. But yeah, it's something that we're very aware of and we know needs to happen. And part of that may involve perhaps, presenting back to staff on a wider basis and being able to allow them to kind of see some of the process as well behind it, that's gone on behind it. So we'll probably discuss among ourselves as a team and with key stakeholders, including Janet, how we can best do that. Because I mean, basically, it may be that some of it is about being there on the ground in Linton House, for instance, and being able to talk to you face to face, which would be a novel concept. So yeah, basically working out the best way we can do that so that everyone understands not only what's there, but how they can use it when they're supporting people with advising them, for instance. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly does. No, it does. And I think with everyone being so busy, and like you say, communications might come out and it just gets overlooked. But what you're talking about in terms of a more practical, either a range of workshops or drop-ins or face-to-face, I think that may be one thing that might be more efficient. Certainly, I think would be helpful for people who are pressed for time and just may not see it, or you read the comms and it's just an abstract thing. It just becomes something that you read and it's abstract. It doesn't, relate to your day to day, or you can't see how it relates. But yeah, I think practical. The second question I wanted to ask was regarding residents, and in terms of how they are able to use and access. I mean, I think we already have IT stations in Linton House where residents who don't have IT access or might not have data or might not have the technical know-how. Again, is that something that is linking into just being able to broaden residents' access to IT and digital ways of doing things? So if they've got to upload documentation and stuff like that, I mean, I suppose that's already part of the process in any case, but I just wanted to know if there was any more thought given as to how they might do that, given that a lot more of this seems to be online in terms of updating and uploading documents. We want people to use it, but we want to make it easier for them to do so that, I guess, part of the way is reducing the number of people coming through the front door.
Exactly.
But there may be some who still need to.
Exactly. And I think it's getting that balance right, so the people who feel they need, for instance, face-to-face support can focus on them, as in terms of their priority needs. But the people who can be able to access online, that it's really highlighted for them how they can do that. There is a concurrent program going on in terms of digital access, and this ties into a wider strand that's going on across local government to increase accessibility for people in the community in terms of digital services. That's not a strand of work I'm directly involved with, but I know that work is going on, and that, for instance, there will be work going on around funding and how that funding's allocated and how best to kind of serve those. So I think that's, again, something for us to take away in terms of how we can tie that into the work that we're doing. So I think it's really valuable to highlight that, actually, because it's like it's another step in the user journey. It's like, we in terms of like user needs, it would make sense that we've identified the needs in terms of the content needs, in terms of the actual bigger services that need to be built around that, and as part of that, building that service, how people can ultimately access that content.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Johanna. I just wanted to revisit your first question, actually, around comms. So we are very much in contact with Michael Legister, who is the communications officer, and we actually have another meeting with him scheduled for later this week. But alongside that to talk about how we kind of communicate this new and updated content on a wider sort of scale. But alongside that, there have been communications sent out to heads of service, so that includes Janet, Dwayne, when he was here, obviously Mark Hillman, and others whenever new content has been published and gone live. So, for example, the rough sleepers and homelessness pages that went live because that was new and revised content, and also some of the URLs were updated, so there were going to be broken links. That was shared, and likewise any other content that has gone out has been shared. I don't know if it's been filtering down to those of you who kind of work on the front line from your service head. So I think maybe it might be an opportunity to kind of maybe sync up with the likes of Janet, Mike Hillman, or whoever is your service area head, just to kind of find out what's been going on. And I guess also I'd like to use this opportunity to make a request to the subject matter experts who are on the call today. We are sort of trying our best to engage with you. We are trying our best to collaborate with you, and we appreciate how busy and hectic things are for you on a day-to-day basis. But this work can only go so far if we don't have engagement from you guys. And this is not directed at you specifically, Shahana. It's anyone who is an SME, as has been identified by Janet, in order to move this work forward, including communicate it more widely and make sure that residents, as well as customer service officers, etc., are aware of it and know how to signpost people to new information. We kind of really need you to be on board with what is going on in terms of fact checking and just kind of being responsive as when you can, because so far it's been really difficult, if I'm just going to be honest, to kind of to get feedback from SMEs. Like, a lot of work has been going on, as you can see, but we're just not really getting the traction that we could get if there was more collaboration, basically. So not Simone and you or anyone else, but just wanted to make that request, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I guess like I said, I'm conscious of, like you said, you've done a lot of work, and I'm conscious that this has gone out. And again, I don't know to what extent it has or hasn't filtered down to frontline staff. But I guess just looking at it, my worry is that if it isn't, or if it isn't efficiently, then it's not going to work as best as we would like it to. And that's the thing. Yeah. It's how do we get it? So whether it's like you say, physical face-to-face training, or just running a series of workshops and people book into the one that most suits their availability, and they just have a live demo of 15 minutes or something, just to say, there's, you know, just take it through. I don't know, something like that. I just think would be maybe one way we can look at.
No, yeah, definitely. Obviously, the new content or the revised content is just as important for you guys to have a grip on as it is for our residents to be able to access and, you know, benefit from, because it's ultimately it's for them. It's based on their user needs, but you guys need to have the, I guess, the knowledge to be able to signpost it to them. So yeah, that sounds good. It's something we'll definitely pick up on.
Thank you.
But yeah. Please do pass on the message to your colleagues who aren't on this call, by the way, about just kind of, you know, just engagement and collaboration. That'd be really helpful. Are there any other questions?
Just on that note,
yeah, go for it, Tom.
So I've got Housing Programme Board on Thursday, and one of the things I'm going to raise there with Alan and Janet is getting like permission from the very top for people in housing needs to have the fact checking or the time to do fact checking on this. I'd like to get to a point kind of before Christmas where we've like everything we've written that's ready for fact check and get feedback on, like time is being carved out for you to do it, and we can kind of clear the decks. And then when we come back in January, we're kind of like starting with a clean slate of stuff to work through. Because yeah, I know it's a very easy thing for us to say, hey, we need more help, but you've got a ton of things on, and we kind of need to make sure that by you helping us, you're not getting into trouble for not doing something else. So we'll get that agreed with Alan and Janet at Programme Board as like an official minuted action. And then yeah, hopefully get some time in with you over the next couple of weeks to get all the content signed off.
Thanks, Tom. That sounds great. Thank you. Any more? No? Okay then. Thank you everyone for joining. And thank you also for your support this year, actually. It's been